job, or they're a dependent of somebody who has no job. So 30 million, you get up to 50 million. They have no health care. That's another 50 million. They don't have welfare. Normally, mothers and children would have had welfare. Clinton got rid of that. So it's bipartisan on the demolition side. And they're in dire poverty. So the one thing they live on is food stamps. About 48, 49 million Americans are on food stamps. Now, anybody who proposes cutting that for any reason is advocating genocide against the American people. And it's out of this world. And we have the Republicans in the House now. They say they want to cut $32 billion, and now they've gone down to $6 billion. And the Democrats in the Senate say, oh, we only want to cut it by $5 to $6 billion. Those are all Nuremberg indictments. Anybody who proposes that stuff should be reminded that there was a Nuremberg court where people, they paid a heavy price for doing things like that, because there's no difference. The ultimate logic of austerity is a concentration camp. Basically saying, we're going to lower your living standard to the point where you're going to work you so hard. We're not only going to steal the gold from your teeth, we're going to take the calories that are in your body and use those. And when you're down, to nothing, then we'll throw you on the junk heap, and that's the end of you. So the first basic point is no cuts in anything. No cuts in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment benefits, S-chip, Head Start. No cuts. This was the main point in the Syriza agitation, and it would have to be the beginning point anywhere in the world. No more cuts. The bankers caused this crisis. They can pay. Who should pay for the depression? Working people or rich parasites? Bankers. Now, when you say bankers, and we'll get to in a second, you're not so much talking about taxing them as individuals, although there's nothing wrong with that, but it's mainly Wall Street turnover. In other words, if we're talking about 2 quadrillion of derivatives in Wall Street and a turnover which is probably 4, 5, 6 quadrillion, we don't know, buying and selling of the 2 quadrillion, the obvious question with that is what kind of sales tax are they paying? And they're paying nothing. So they're like the French aristocracy before the French Revolution of 1789. Wall Street pays no taxes. They pay nothing on the buying and selling that they do, and they pay nothing like GE, right, under Immelt, General Electric, which is a hedge fund, not an industrial corporation, has paid basically no tax that entire time. So you want to maintain the social safety net. And again, that's simply a matter of maintaining your labor power. The reason you want to do it is obviously you can't have the descent into barbarism. You can't have people dying. But you've also got to, from the point of view of a nation, you got to say we need to have a qualified labor force. And if we don't maintain our, for example, university education, soon we won't have a qualified labor force anymore. The Chinese will eat us alive. If you want to follow some of these recipes, you got to factor in the cost of learning Chinese so you can take orders. If you don't want to take orders in Chinese, you better get ready to fund a whole series of programs. So the entire New Deal, New Frontier, Great Society social safety net has got to be maintained. Now, the point about that is not that people should live on food stamps and unemployment benefits, because this is not the goal. It's an emergency stabilization so that people don't die. And, for example, Medicare for all, right? Just throw it all open, say everybody who wants to can have Medicare, $100 per person per month. And if you're broke, if you're destitute, and if you're unemployed, then it basically goes down to zero. So a series of measures like this. The second point then is look at speculative capital, so-called. In other words, fictitious capital. Not all capital is real. And if you have a locomotive, if you have a drill press, if you have scientific equipment, that's a capital good. That's real. But a lot of what is called capital today, capital formation, is derivatives. And these have no value. As a matter of fact, they have negative value. You want to have to pay somebody to take them to the shredder.
So, Webster, what do you do to the counterfeit market that threatens to overthrow the real economy?
Well, one thing we've already talked about is banning the most dangerous kinds of derivatives, right? We know that credit default swaps destroyed AIG. We know that collateralized debt obligations came, very close and would have destroyed virtually every other bank in Wall Street. Bear Stearns, Goldman Sachs, they were all bankrupt. Citibank, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase. So ban the worst derivatives and slap a 1 cent on the dollar tax on all others. For individuals, by the way, if you're worried about your, trading for your retirement account, we could have a allowance of $1 million per person, free, right, free of charge, so that if you have to, buy and sell some stocks for your own purposes, that's fine. You won't be taxed. But once you get into the high frequency trading, flash trading, program trading, 1 million transactions per second, well, you got to see if they're doing 1 million transactions per second and 1 penny goes to the federal treasury for each one of those, that activity is going to die down considerably. It's going to be limited to things that have a real economic purpose. I would say a lot of the over-financialization, the casino economy can best be dealt with a simple idea. We pay sales tax 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11% in California now. That's a regressive tax. That's not the kind of tax you want. Let Wall Street bear their share of the burden. Those are not capital markets anymore. Those are gambling dens. So that's one way to do it. The other obvious thing is end too big to fail. Zombie banks cannot have a claim on the resources of society, be it the U.S. Treasury or the Federal Reserve. They got to have a social purpose. They don't have one. So let them go down. Put them through Chapter 11, more likely Chapter 7, forced liquidation. Get rid of the zombie banks. And when you do it, all the derivatives that they contain get destroyed. In other words, that's what a bankruptcy judge does. He distinguishes between obligations of the bankrupt firm that can be maintained and others that can't be. So the ones that have to be triaged are always the derivatives. Then you get into some of the things I was talking about before. You got to regulate commodities markets. Again, it's mostly a return to the New Deal regulatory regime, Glass-Steagall, right? You don't want to have commercial banks and investment banks or brokerages and insurance companies together. So you got to re-separate those, right? It's too late to avoid the panic with that, but you can do that to avoid the next panic bubble. So I think you get the idea. If you do this, you're going to be reducing the specific gravity of finance in general in the society, and you're going to essentially lift huge burdens. For example, in some cases, when it comes to foreclosures, the obvious thing to do is to say, well, the banks that have issued these foreclosures cannot be allowed to loot the society because we want to save human society. They were bailed out by taxpayers, and now they're going to do a favor to the American people. We're going to have a ban on foreclosures for 5 years or the duration of the world economic crisis, whichever lasts longer. So that's your second point. You got to cut the fictitious capital that's crushing the world, and it means ways to attack zombie banks and ways to attack this tremendous cancer of derivatives, and also re-regulation that will prevent the hedge fund hyenas from doing their work, people like Romney. Now, the third one is this question of the Federal Reserve. You cannot have the Federal Reserve under private control. A lot of it is privately owned, and a lot of it is privately controlled. And the only way you can avoid that under our system is if the activities of the Federal Reserve are controlled by the Congress, by bills that originate in the House, get passed by the Senate, and are signed by the President. If you don't want to have a more far-reaching revolution, which I would not propose, then you have to have the constitutional remedy to the Federal Reserve, is that this is reserved to Congress. So it means let the Congress, with public laws, specify how much credit, how many trillions of credit will be given out, what the interest rates will be for the various categories, and what the approved categories of lending are. So what I'm saying is nationalize the Federal Reserve, federalize the Federal Reserve, seize the Federal Reserve. Don't destroy it, because if you destroy it, you've done a favor to Wall Street, because from the Wall Street perspective, the Federal Reserve is a regulator. It interferes with them, right, in terms of their daily activity. It's not like they're in love with the Federal Reserve. They'd like to go back to the time when there was no Federal Reserve and they could do absolutely anything that they wanted. So make the Federal Reserve a national bank of the United States. Make it the fourth bank of the United States.
So that's Hamiltonian view.
Hamiltonian all the way. And the Hamiltonian because that was successful, right? As it was, without the Bank of the United States would not have survived the first 20 years. As soon as the second Bank of the United States was gone, thanks to Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren, you go into the crash of 1837, the worst depression that we'd ever had. A lot of states go bankrupt, right? About a third of the states in the Union went bankrupt. Economic development slowed down. Railroad building slowed. Canal building slowed compared to...
Got it. Okay, so let's move to point 4.
Okay, so, but here's the thing now. We want to say to the central bank, national bank, up to now, you've been doing 0% credit for zombie banks and hedge fund hyenas only. We're telling you to stop that. We're now going to
do it for the American people and small business.
For production. Yeah, but not any kind of small business. Production. And we know what production means, right? Industry. Tangible physical wealth. Commodity production, assembly lines, building things.
Textiles, machinery, things. Electronics, computers, firearms, mining.
Farming, energy production. There's a tangible physical result. Also, scientific research, I would say, now has to go for production. So you're basically saying we're going to have a Main Street window, and if you have a restaurant, dry cleaning, an auto repair shop, anything where there's a tangible physical product, not financial services, you can get a 0% loan. Now, the problem with that is that would, in theory, be enough to have a recovery, but it won't be because in the depressed economy, people are afraid. They're afraid that if they invest, they're going to lose their money. So you got to take it one step further. And that's now going to be my fourth point. This is the defibrillator. You've got to have a massive program of public works infrastructure. This has been done under many, many circumstances around the world. We had it in the New Deal, kept the U.S. going through the 1930s. You basically say the states, or let's put it another way. We'll start from the new national bank. The head of the U.S. National Bank, who is really the Secretary of the Treasury, right, says, we're putting out a tender offer. We want all the states to come forward with infrastructure projects, right? We know what we need. The Texas T-bone, the California maglev and fast rail. We need the new tunnel under the Hudson River between New York and New Jersey that Christie doesn't want to build. We need the new Howard Street tunnel in Baltimore so that double-decker container trains can go from the deepwater port of Baltimore to the rest of the U.S., right? Similar things in Norfolk, similar port. We've got a rail system which is collapsing, be it freight, passenger, or commuter. We've got a electricity grid, which is always on the verge of collapse. We've got schools where I think almost half of U.S. schools are now 50 years old or more, and on and on. We lost 1,000 hospitals over the past 3 to 4 decades. Got to rebuild all of those. So what you're essentially saying is to the states is, states, you states issue bonds. We're telling you to make them 0% interest rate, 0% interest for free. 100-year maturities, century bonds just issued. Caltech just issued some. They're smart. They issued century bonds. The National Bank is going to buy those bonds. They're all earmarked for useful physical infrastructure. And with those, we'll give you $1 trillion to start with, right? I call it a terra tranche. $1 trillion tranche or segment of credit goes out to the states. And then once that's gone, it's going to be a revolving fund. We'll do another $1 trillion. Because remember, the essence of a national bank is it's a credit system. You manufacture money out of thin air. That's exactly what you do. It's the power of the state, the credit of the United States government. It is the most powerful institution in the world.